When thinking of China, a lot of people think of these pristine blue and white porcelain objects. But what's the story behind these beautiful objects that have captivated the world's attention for centuries now? And is there anything we can learn about them from below the surface? Pun intended. What does the modern city of somewhere that was once the biggest ceramic producer in the world look and feel like today? Well, I have come to China's porcelain capital, Jingdezhen, to try and find out. And I'm already seeing art around the city. First art, chicken feet art. No, but seriously, this was one of the most creative cities I've ever seen in my life. It felt like everywhere you looked there was art. Even the sidewalks and trash cans were beautiful, and look at these street lamps covered in beautiful porcelain designs. I stayed in Jushan district, the central urban area of Jingdezhen, an area with over 1,000 years of porcelain making history. I stayed in a hostel right off of the Ceramic Sculpture Art Avenue, an area with countless artist workshops, studios, classes, beautiful objects for sale, bamboo, and a market that would line the streets. My hostel was so lovely. It was actually a part of this sculpture factory, so there were all these rooms with ceramic studios in it. Even my door number was porcelain, and my room was so nice. It was clean bedding, shelves, a blackout curtain, a nice modern clean bathroom, all for less than $11 a night. First, a brief history of porcelain. Featuring clips I took at these couple museums. If you think history is boring, please skip like halfway through this video or this part will make you fall asleep. Porcelain was first produced in China as far back as the Eastern Han Dynasty. Then in the Tang Dynasty, important techniques for it developed. This specific shade of cobalt blue was introduced to China. It actually originated in the Middle East, in what was Persia at the time, present-day Iran, and also Iraq, and it was transported all the way from the Middle East through Central Asia, through all of China to get here via these ancient trade routes that we call the Silk Road. We also call it Islamic blue, and in Chinese it's called Huiqing. So this kind that says Huiqing was the kind that originated in Persia, or today Iran, and it's a little darker and more purple because apparently it has more iron in it than what was really commonly used next. This is called Shiziqing, also called just like stone blue. It's found in Jiangxi province, so that's why it was way more available, and apparently it's more magnesium rich, so when you mix it with other colors, it can create shades of blue that are like silver all the way down to purple, much lighter than the Huiqing color. As you can see, the big difference. I ended up asking someone who apparently leads tours at the Chinese Ceramics Museum some questions I had, particularly about this initial trade of cobalt blue between the Tang and Persian merchants, because the fact that that kind of exchange was happening over 1,000 years ago just blows my mind. I asked him what language they would have used to communicate with each other. He said he has no idea. And I asked him if any Persian merchants would have settled in China at that time, and he said probably not. Now I find myself back in Shanghai on the verge of absolutely plummeting down this rabbit hole, because apparently there was an ancient language that traders along the Silk Road all the way from the Middle East to China could have used to communicate with each other. It's considered an Eastern Iranian language, but the homeland of the people who would have invented this language is where modern-day Uzbekistan and Tajikistan are located. And there is literally evidence that these Sogdian traders would have settled in Tang, China at that time, because there are Tang Dynasty tombs that inside of them have skeletons that have both Chinese and Sogdian genetic material. I am mind blown, but anyway, back to the video. Then in the Song Dynasty, porcelain production expanded and the 5 great kilns were established in China in other provinces like Henan and Hebei. And at some point during that dynasty, an emperor recognized the great products being produced right here in Jingdezhen. At that time, Jingdezhen was called Changnan, for south of the Changjiang, which is the Yangtze River. Then that emperor, Emperor Zhenzong, whose reign was called the Jingde reign from year 1004 to 1007, decided to rename this town after himself, and hence this city's name is now the town of Jingdezhen. So that every amazing porcelain product here would carry his name, and also this town would start supplying his imperial court. And with that imperial stamp of approval, Jingdezhen's fate was secured as an important porcelain producer here in China. And fun fact, the city's previous name being Changnan is actually exactly where Europeans got the idea to call these porcelain products China from, Changnan. In the Yuan dynasty, Jingdezhen continued to be a major producer of porcelain. It got super famous, well known, and a lot of its products were making its way to the Middle East. Here are the three main types of porcelain produced at that time. Through porcelain, we can see the diverse cultural nature of the Yuan dynasty, whether that be through Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, or Mongolian influence. But in the Ming dynasty, she became the moment, especially during the Shende reign, which at one point, the palace ordered Jingdezhen to produce it 443,500 pieces in one go. What I find especially interesting is viewing art as a window into the time period in which it was made. So, for example, as just mentioned, there was a ton of high-quality imperial porcelain produced under the Shende reign. This shows us not only that the emperor took art very seriously, but that this was a particularly prosperous time in China, especially in comparison to other periods like Chongzhen and Tianqi, when very little was produced because it was so tumultuous. Then we see periods like that under the Hongzhi emperor, where almost all the porcelain produced was for usage in daily life, and as it turns out, he had implemented a policy of restraining extravagance and promoting frugality. So this, plus the total absence of that super colorful dou-cai porcelain, makes total sense. Similarly, the most gourd-shaped porcelain was produced under Emperor Jiajing, who was spiritually Taoist. At that point, porcelain was also getting really popular in Europe, and almost all of it was being produced right here in Jingdezhen. It should be noted, though, that the quality of materials and the skill level of the laborers of the porcelain going to Europe was way lower than the quality of that being produced for the Imperial Palace. I mean, just look at the detail on some of these imperial pieces. Then at the beginning of the Qing dynasty, because of the change in power, there was a big dip in porcelain production called the blank era. But then there was a big porcelain resurgence with this new style called famille rose. Also during this time, because of the Industrial Revolution happening in Europe, Europeans were finally able to produce porcelain themselves, and they were mass producing it for cheap. So Jingdezhen stopped being as big of a competitor on the global stage. Here are some beautiful pieces made during the High Qing era, aka the golden age of the Qing dynasty, which was that under these three emperors. These Qianlong ones are all famille rose, and the last one has hundreds of deer on it. So why Jingdezhen? What was it about this city that was so conducive to porcelain production? Well, aside from the obvious, the entrepreneurship, creativity, and hardworking nature of the people, it was its natural environment. Jingdezhen is surrounded by all of these mountains that have an abundance of high-quality ingredients. Two in particular that when mixed together create a type of porcelain clay that is much more plastic than other porcelain clays around the world. They say that this type of clay allowed Jingdezhen potters to make the impossible possible. These two natural ingredients are called baidunzi, or little white mound, or pottery stone, and gaolingtu, which is cowling. Another way Mother Nature played a role in Jingdezhen's ceramic success was by the town's close proximity to all the tributaries of the Yangtze River. All of this water nearby provided a power source to crush the mined minerals from the mountainside, as well as allowed Jingdezhen, which is located in this landlocked Jiangxi province, to import minerals and resources from, example, the Middle East here, as well as export its ceramic goods outwards.
是什么菜？
是我们当地的特色，叫油条包麻子。
里面有什么材料？
里面有黑芝麻，还有这个糍粑。糍粑就是糯米蒸熟打的这个糍粑，然后黑芝麻加上白糖，还有糍粑裹在这个油条里面，口味是外酥里嫩，很好吃。
哇，谢谢你告诉我。
尝一下。
它是纯素的吗？
纯素的。
哇，太好了，好，谢谢。
Wow, that looks amazing. It's like covered in sugar too. Okay, so usually these fried dough things are like in long cylinders called youtiao, like fried dough stick, and you can like in Shanghai, you break them up and you dip them into like soft, warm tofu that you can add chili in. You can dip them in just warm soy milk, but I've never seen them just covered in sugar and then with this like soft rice cake ice cream vibe thing in the center. Like this is like a dessert youtiao. I didn't even know this existed. This is like a Chinese churro plus this cream thing on the inside. When I'm here vegan and I'm ever missing like churros or donuts, I think I just have to get on a train and come to Jiangxi province and get this because this is like freaking delicious, 1,000 out of 10.
我想跟你说，那肯定是我在中国最好吃的甜点，非常非常好吃。对，它让我想起来我小的时候，我很开心。谢谢你给我介绍一下。
This huge, beautiful, serene place is part of the Ancient Kiln Folk Expo area and shows us what the ancient porcelain making process was like throughout dynastic China. First, I'm gonna go take a look at the ceramics workshops. There used to be hundreds, thousands here that all specialized in just one part of porcelain production. During the Ming Dynasty, porcelain production got so complex and the division of labor so detailed and specific that according to historical records, making some porcelain used to take 72 handovers. To hand over a piece of unfinished porcelain to the next worker, Jingdezhen had tons of porters who worked to transport the pieces using different methods of transportation depending on the needs of that specific piece. As you can imagine, this was a serious ordeal. So the reason this is such a special museum is because what they've done is rebuilt what the ancient imperial kilns and ceramic workshops would have looked like in Jingdezhen during the Ming and Qing dynasties. And then they employ a ton of people to work here and actually produce porcelain in those traditional ancient methods. So if you come here at certain times of day, I heard exactly 2 o'clock, you can watch people using these ancient ceramic workshops, and then you can buy the pottery that they produce here. Modeled after one that would have been used during the Song dynasty. This is one of the dragon kilns. They would feed the flame here with trees, sticks, and grass from the surrounding nature and use the power from the hillside to pump the flames. They were called dragon kilns because they were built along the sides of mountains, giving it a long shape of a dragon. This type of kiln is called a steamed bun kiln because of the shape. As you can tell, it looks like a steamed bun. And the inside could apparently get up to 1,300 degrees Celsius. And then this is a gourd kiln used during the Ming Dynasty. And it's a gourd based on the front of it being big and going small. Here is a duck egg shaped kiln that would have been used during the Qing Dynasty and was specifically good for firing the blue and white Qinghua porcelain. It's called the duck egg shaped because the front part is much wider than the back part. And then here is a model of the imperial kilns used during the Ming and Qing dynasties that are called the 6 types kiln, which are 6 different types of kiln that you'd use depending on the size and type of porcelain you were firing to achieve maximum results. Now this area is called the Taoyang Alley Historical and Cultural District. You need to get a ticket for this area so that you can enter the Imperial Kiln Museum. I was not mad about it. I loved seeing this traditional paper cutting art. And maybe for my first time ever, the absolutely stunning rice pattern porcelain. And the stark contrast of these charming ancient alleyways with the stunning, bold, modern kiln museum. Right now I'm in the Imperial Kiln Museum. This is the site of the porcelain factory that was established during the Ming and Qing dynasties, specifically to produce porcelain for imperial and state use. So people say that this factory site represents the pinnacle of Chinese porcelain production. So this kiln factory, as opposed to other ones, did not seek profit, it seeked perfection, okay? So because this factory could only produce highest quality porcelain products, when they did produce something that wasn't up to standards or was defective in some way, they would have to burn it or bury it. So because of that, recently they found, it says by the end of 2024, they found over 3,000 artifacts from under the ground right at this site, and they joke that this is called the Mount Everest of ceramics, because there's such a huge mountain of shards of porcelain pieces. And look at this. This is the map of the ground under where I'm standing right now, starting with present day, going down from early Qing dynasty down through so many different Ming dynasty emperors, all the way to the Yuan dynasty, of just remnants from the different dynasties piled up on top of each other in the form of porcelain. An absolute wall of porcelain pillows. The main reason I think porcelain is interesting is when I see pieces that tell us the story of cultural exchange, especially in as far back as ancient times. Take a look at these pieces. Do you see the 3 lotus flowers in the center? These flowers as an art motif did not originate in China, but rather as far away in distance and as far back in time as ancient Egypt, where it symbolized the sun, creation, the cycle of life, rebirth, and purity. Over time, images of this lotus flower spread across the Middle East and Asia, collecting new meanings along the way across the centuries. The lotus flower was symbolic to people in Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, also Iran, also in Hinduism and Buddhism, and more. It's widely believed that the lotus motif in art was introduced to China along with Buddhism, in which it represents enlightenment, spiritual journey, and moral purity, among other things. Once in China, it was also used in Confucian art to symbolize the ideal man's pure character, unaffected by worldly corruption, as the pristine lotus is uncorrupted by the muddy water from which it grows. At some point, a lotus, especially a red one, became viewed as symbolizing a woman's womanly parts. The lotus flower has so many seeds in it, so this represented fertility, and also at this time in China, women's bound feet, which were seen as objects of desire, were called golden lotuses. Now, do you see these 2 mandarin ducks? Mandarin ducks as an art motif did originate in China and spread across East Asia to countries like Japan and Korea to symbolize lifelong lovers. Although mandarin ducks don't actually mate for life, they do stay with the same partner for many breeding seasons and have a lot of babies. So in art, they represent deep devotion and an enduring love, as well as, of course, fertility. And art with images of mandarin ducks on them were often given as wedding gifts. So when you combine these motifs of the red lotuses and mandarin ducks, we can gather that possibly this plate was being given to wish a couple a happy, loyal, and fruitful marriage. But which couple? And what language is this? All the signs said was that this was a plate made during the Xuande reign in the colorful doucai style. And at this specific time at this museum, no one there could confirm to me what language this was. We know it's not Mandarin Chinese, which was the official spoken and written language of the Ming Dynasty. My best guess is that it is classical Tibetan. Parts of it look like Sanskrit, but I looked it up, and because the written Tibetan language was derived from North Indian scripts, and Tibetan scholars translated a ton of Sanskrit Buddhist texts, apparently classical Tibetan can almost look like Sanskrit in its written form. So what was Imperial China's relationship like with Tibet at this time? Why might porcelain plates have been produced at the Ming Imperial kiln factory with Tibetan and not Mandarin writing on them? Because there was even another plate right next to it with the same motifs as well as classical Tibetan writing on it too. Well, in contrast to the previous dynasty, the Yuan dynasty, when Mongolian leaders exercised administrative control over Tibet, integrating it into their empire with a permanent occupation, the Han leaders of the Ming dynasty had a different kind of relationship. There is debate amongst historians about what their exact relationship was, but it can be said that there was no permanent military presence of the Ming in Tibet, and that Tibet was largely self-governing, and that at the same time there was a profitable exchange of goods between the Tibetans and the Ming court. We can call Tibet a tributary state of Ming China because it was required that envoys brought the Ming court desired goods, at the time predominantly horses for military, and then in return, the Ming would gift the Tibetans lavish things like gold and silks. So because this plate has Tibetan language all around it, and given this trade arrangement between the Ming court and Tibet, I think this plate was a gift from the Ming to someone important to them in Tibet. And given the symbolism on it, I think it was a wedding gift. Exactly whose wedding gift though, we'll maybe never know. This is another example of the beautiful blue and white or Qinghua porcelain with what I think is classical Tibetan writing on it, which if correct, I believe the Ming court would have made so as to bestow upon Tibet as part of their tribute system. So this sign confirms that the language on this bowl is Sanskrit and it was found right here in 2014. So what do you think? Do you think this bowl was made to foster a political alliance, for regular commercial trade, or who knows, maybe an imperial decoration with some sort of religious inscription? Maybe we'll never know. I saw this poster board in the Chinese Ceramics Museum, and of course my eyes were drawn straight to the non-Mandarin Chinese writing on it. This furnace has a Persian inscription on it, and when I look up why porcelain like this might have been produced during specifically the Tianshun reign, one of the explanations I find, separate from commercial trade and diplomatic gifts, is that within this predominantly Han Chinese dynasty of the Ming, there was actually a number of high-level eunuchs and elites that were either Muslim themselves or otherwise very familiar with Islamic culture, and they would have commissioned wares with Persian and Arabic writing on them for themselves. If anyone has additional information on anything I've mentioned, please feel free to comment. I'd love to see. Now this is the Pottery Street in Jushan District, a long and elegant avenue lined with London plane trees and these glamorous, unique, creative ceramics shops, workshops, and studios, which at some point you can turn off of and enter the Taoyang Village Night Market, where I ended up buying basically everyone I've ever met a present. So this market is a blinding labyrinth of the ceramic version of basically anything you can imagine. We're talking Crocs, number 2s, bagels, Labubus, cowboy-shaped Hello Kitty cups, massive Qinghua vases, little shrimps, and flowers. To my surprise, I got a lesson in a traditional Chinese instrument and got to hold a bird named Cake.
This is my hardware go. It's
Yes.
very famous.
它的蛋糕
好可爱！
3次，
哇，
聪明的，
你教他怎么做？
是的，它也会。我大一点，好棒！我2年前开始养的，我觉得鸟吧，它比狗要好一点，好养一点。我家也养了狗，我家有狗，但是我不太喜欢。
为什么？
不知道，我不是每天要遛啊，要洗澡啊，鸟很干净，没有味道的。
他们自己洗澡
对
吗？
自己洗澡的，很听话的。
他的头后
被它
面
叨的。
哦，谢谢你给我介绍一下。
I also met this really cool mother-daughter artist duo and ended up interviewing the daughter with some questions on present-day Jingdezhen.
现在主要是一些年轻人，大概在20岁到40岁左右的，大部分都是游客在买，基本上年轻人买的要更多一点。其实这边最出名的就是瓷器，各式各样的瓷器，还有各种各样的像你们不是很懂的釉面，然后还有它的材质和手感，这个都是要你自己去上手触摸去体验，你才能知道的。
She showed me a couple of the glazing methods she uses in her own artwork, which were crystalline and frosted.
很容易知道每个人的创造性很强。
因为陶瓷是很具有创造性的，如果你不去努力的创新它，可能很快就会被市场淘汰。所以每一个人的创造力需要非常的强。
谢谢你。
And she and her friend were so nice. They both gave me gifts afterwards.
可以
OK 好，
挺好的。
好。对你来说，景德镇最近20年发生了什么变化
20年了。
对
，20年的话，景德镇变化挺大的。比如道路，对吧？绿化、空气都挺棒的。
我听说，这里之前有很多工作的污染，但是现在看起来好像完全没有。
对，你看我们中国的道路挺干净的，外来人口也越来越多了。
对你来说，最常见的外地人是从哪里来的？
这个应该是全国各地，包括外国友人都有，因为他这边生活节奏比较慢。
生活的速度比较慢，很健康，
对，
很舒服。
对，很舒服，
这里有
很健康，
很多很漂亮的大自然。
对
现在的树叶的颜色都改变，变成了黄色的，因为是秋天，很漂亮。谢谢你回答我的问题。
没事。
But don't worry, I got to repay the favor by being in a few of his Chinese version of TikTok videos.
讲中文真的，
我的中文很差，
很好。
This is Sambao Pottery Village, a modern artistic neighborhood surrounded by gentle mountains that people from all over come to take ceramics classes and popular Chinese Instagram posts. I was lucky enough on my trip to meet a girl from Shanghai who was in Jingdezhen taking one of these classes.
你为什么决定来景德镇？
因为我觉得景德镇是一个很有魅力的地方。我相信全中国的人都知道这一个小镇，然后都会对中国的瓷器想要有更深入的了解的话，都会选择这里。
你在景德镇白天做什么？
白天我做陶艺。
哇，什么样的陶艺？
景德镇这边有很多的培训机构，然后我选择了其中一家，然后报了大概7天左右的课程。我觉得静下心来做陶艺，一方面是对自己的修心，还有一个就是也是对陶瓷的具体的怎么做也可以有深入的了解，很充实。每天可以看这些瓷器展览，然后做自己喜欢的事情，很开心。
谢谢你回答我的问题。
不客气。
头是吧？这边，哎，再往左倒头，对，哎，对，他腰往下看我。
What? Okay, where I am right now is called Xinping Porcelain Palace, and it was built by a woman who was over 80 years old, Yu Armei, and she moved to Jingdezhen at age 12 to be an apprentice porcelain artist. Then she worked in 2 state-owned porcelain factories where she got a really successful career, over which time she was collecting all of these porcelain pieces and all of these shards of porcelain, and ended up at the end of her career, over age 80, like I said, creating this absolute palace with over 60,000 shards of porcelain, which amounts to 80 tons. Her family members thought she was going senile, but this ended up being this beautiful gift to this town of Jingdezhen and a beautiful testament to her lifelong career as an artist here. Can you see how the windows are the shapes of vases? So creative. Oh my gosh, it's hard to see in the camera, but I can see streams of light coming in. Marx, Engels, Mao, Lenin, and Stalin. Sun Yat-sen and Qingling Song. The last emperor of the Qing dynasty, Puyi. Then we have Guanxu Emperor and the Tongzhi Emperor. Qianlong Emperor, the Kangxi Emperor, Zhu Di, who is the Yongle Emperor, Genghis Khan, and his grandson Kublai Khan, who was the first emperor of the Yuan dynasty. Emperor Taizu, founder of the Song dynasty. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. Some kings from the Zhou dynasty, and the Yellow Emperor, who is this mythological first ever ruler anywhere in China, who's the ancestor of all Chinese people. Pangu, the creator of the universe according to Chinese mythology. China has such a long history with so many important historical figures that changed the course of history itself, and somehow I've never been in a room like this with just all of their portraits all over the place. I mean, not one woman, and there are some very important women in Chinese history, but that's beside the point. I was not expecting this hall to be in this porcelain palace at all. This palace is 3 floors, so now I'm on the 2nd floor, and it's even more history. It's the story of China, as told by the winners and the elite and the men as per usual. part of the third floor is dedicated to Yuan Longping, who is called the father of hybrid rice and helped make food security a reality for millions of Chinese people by developing high-yield hybrid rice varieties. Apparently that was just Palace 1. The Belt and Road Maritime Porcelain Road. People traveling by land and by sea. Then you go closer and it's just every little teeny tiny little itty bitty detail. These ones, purple and gold, 4.8% volume of alcohol. All of these say alcohol. This is totally amazing. It's honestly blowing me away, and just the weather's so nice. There's mountains, there's all this grass. Like, this is a beautiful place to spend some time. Dengxi Work slogan. I'm trying another local dish right now. This is called leng fen, which means cold noodle. It's known for being thick, like the same diameter as a chopstick, and it's made of rice powder and it's really chewy. Also, on top of it are these pickled orange pieces, which is so interesting. I've never had on another Chinese dish before. So it's so good. It's really chewy and really umami, and I'm really enjoying it. And also tangy from the orange. I bought some tofu from this shop to add into the noodles. Some much needed protein. I met a fellow history lover, this guy in a museum, who wanted to chauffeur me to my next location, so we went together to see the world's largest ceramic bowl that's 80 meters tall.
看起来非常梦幻。
I finally met my roommates. Hee hee! And we just had an amazing 3-hour conversation about our different cultures and women's changing roles in society. Oh my god, my eyes look so scary. That was just amazing. I'm so happy. So now I'm on my way back to Shanghai with an extra £1 billion of porcelain gifts. Thank you so much for watching my video, and also please look at the ceilings in this train station. 1,500. 4,000.